Hi, so thank you for showing interest in this ebook. This is Ajay, the founder of Step by Step Tunes and author of this ebook. Let me give you a quick insight of this ebook. So, as the title of the book says, Docker for Java developers. This book is about Docker but specifically written for Java developers. It focuses on containerizing Java applications using Docker. This book is specially written for those Java developers who wish to learn Docker from absolute scratch. It contains theoretical concepts, code examples, step-by-step explanation of code, and also the expected output. I have tried my level best to attach screenshots of each and every step to make your learning as smooth as possible. So without much delay, let's dive into this ebook. Now as you can see, this book consists of total of 224 pages and it is divided into 11 chapters. So let's have a look at each chapter one by one. So chapter 1 is about introduction to Docker. In this chapter I have covered what is Docker, what problems Docker is trying to solve. In other words, why should we use Docker or what are the advantages of Docker. Then I have also discussed the concept of virtualization and containerization and what is the difference between them. After that, I have covered the concept of Windows subsystem for Linux, that is WSL, the relationship between Docker and WSL, and how to enable WSL. After that, I have also covered the installation part of Docker. Here I have discussed the installation of Docker desktop on Windows and Linux machine and installation of Docker engine on WSL. So this is about chapter 1. So in a nutshell, chapter 1 talks about introduction and installation of Docker. Then proceeding towards chapter 2, in this chapter I have discussed the concept of Docker images and Docker containers using Ubuntu as an example. So in this chapter we will understand what is a Docker image, how to search for a Docker image in Docker repository, that is the Docker Hub, how to pull a Docker image from Docker Hub, how to verify the pulled Docker image, how to create and run containers from the Docker image, how to run the container in interactive mode, how to stop and remove the containers, and how to remove the Docker image. Thus, in chapter 2, you will basically learn the Docker commands to pull the Docker image, verify Docker images, command to run the Docker container, stop the Docker container, and remove the Docker container, and also remove the Docker image. Now let's move towards chapter 3. So from this chapter, we are going to start our journey towards containerizing Java standalone applications. Now in this chapter, we will first learn to containerize a simple Java Hello World application. And we will do this using three approaches. Approach 1 is basically a manual approach. Here we will learn to containerize the Hello World application using an Ubuntu image. Here we will also learn how to install JDK on Ubuntu container and various Linux commands like apt, apt-get, apt-get install and apt-get update. We will also talk about Debian based systems and non-Debian based systems. In approach 2, we will use an Ubuntu image to containerize the Hello World Java application. But here we will create a Docker file and use the Ubuntu image inside the Docker file. Here we will also talk about what is a Docker file and few instructions that we use inside the Docker file like from, workdir, run, copy and cmd. In approach 3, we will learn to containerize the Hello World application using a ready-made Java image. In this chapter, we will also see how to containerize the Java application when we are using packages in our application, as well as when we create a jar file for our application. Thus, we will have a look at all the possible options for containerizing a simple Hello World Java application. We will also cover some important questions which will make your understanding more clear. After chapter 3, let's proceed towards chapter 4. So, in this chapter, we will have an overview of instructions used inside a Docker file. So here I have created a table which shows the instruction, the purpose of that instruction, and a small example on how to use that instruction. We will also cover a very important question, that is the difference between run, cmd and entry point commands. Then in chapter 5, we will learn to containerize an interactive Java application. An interactive Java application is nothing but a Java application which accepts input from the user. However, there are certain additional steps that you need to take while containerizing such applications. So we will discuss about those additional steps in this chapter. Then we will proceed towards chapter 6. So in this chapter, we will talk about creating multi-stage Docker files. Now this is a small but very important chapter. So in this chapter, we will discuss what is a multi-stage Docker file, why do we need it, and how to create containers for intermediate stages in multi-stage Docker file. Now proceeding towards chapter 7. So in this chapter, we will learn to containerize MySQL database. Now this is a big chapter and covers all possible approaches for containerizing MySQL database. So in this chapter, I will first cover how to containerize MySQL using an official MySQL image. Then we will learn how to connect to MySQL running inside a container from Windows command prompt as well as Windows PowerShell. Then we will also discuss how to create databases, tables and records inside the containerized MySQL databases. We will also see what happens to our schema when the MySQL container is stopped and removed. Basically, all our schema and data will be lost. In order to preserve the data even after the container is removed, Docker provides something called as Docker volumes. So we will also discuss what is a Docker volume, what are the different types of Docker volumes, and how to persist MySQL data using Docker volumes. In this chapter, I have also discussed how to create schema and insert records inside the schema during container startup. So when the container is started, you already have records in your database. Then we will have a look at few additional options like database name, etc. Then we can specify while containerizing MySQL database. In this chapter, I have also discussed how to connect to containerize MySQL from MySQL Workbench. I have also discussed how to containerize MySQL using a Docker file as well as using a raw Ubuntu image. So this chapter I have discussed everything related to containerizing MySQL database. However, if you are using some other database, you can apply the same concepts to that database as well. In chapter 8, we will learn to containerize a Java JDBC application. Here we will first create and test the application on local machine. Then we will learn how to connect our JDBC application which is running on local machine to a containerized MySQL database. After that, we will also containerize our JDBC application and connect it to containerized MySQL database. Thus now we will be dealing with two containers, one container for our JDBC application and other container for MySQL database. So here we will be working in a multi-container environment. Now the approach that we are following here is a manual approach of working in a multi-container environment, and it has few drawbacks. To overcome these drawbacks, Docker also provides a tool called as Docker Compose, which makes working in a multi-container environment very easy. So we will also have a look at what is Docker Compose, what are its advantages, and how to containerize a Java JDBC application using Docker Compose. Then in chapter 9, we will learn to containerize Hibernate applications. So here we will first create an Hibernate application and run it on local machine. Then we will look at the process of building the Hibernate application, creating a jar file and containerizing that jar file. We will also see how to automate the build process of Hibernate application using Docker file. And then finally we will see how to containerize the Hibernate application using Docker Compose. Then in chapter 10 we will learn to containerize a Spring Boot application. So here also first I have discussed how to create the Spring Boot application and test it on local machine. Then I have discussed how to containerize the Spring Boot application using Docker file and Docker Compose. Then coming to the last chapter, chapter 11. So in this chapter I have discussed containerizing a front-end application. So now here I have taken an example of React, but you can apply the same concepts to Angular or any other front-end framework as well. Now in this chapter, first I have discussed how to set up a React, create a React application and test that React application on local machine. Then I have discussed what modifications you need to make to your React application so that your React application interacts with the containerized Spring Boot application. And then finally I have discussed how to containerize the React application. Thus at the end of this chapter you will be having all the three things running inside the container: MySQL database, the backend Spring Boot application and the front-end React application. So those are the 11 chapters I have covered in this ebook. I hope you liked the contents, and I am pretty confident that this ebook will help you learn Docker in an easy and less time consuming way. The biggest advantage of this ebook is that this is going to remain with you forever. So whenever you want to revise a particular concept, you can quickly go through that particular section and revise it. You do not need to prepare your own notes, especially if you are attending interviews. This ebook is a go-to resource. Also, as technology keeps on evolving, from time to time I am going to update this ebook and keep on adding new contents. And whenever I add new content or update the existing content, I will send you the updated copy via email or any other communication medium absolutely free of cost. Also, if you have any suggestions regarding the contents of this ebook, or if you want any topic which should be included in this ebook, please feel free to reach out to us. You can simply drop an email on our official email ID, contact@stepbysteptuts.com or stepbysteptuts2023@gmail.com, and I will work on your suggestion. So that's all from my side. Thank you and have a good day.